So I think we'll just do a little bit of panel discussion right now if you are still up for that. So I hope that the remaining participants here will stay on for a bit. So we'll take a few questions from the panel. So Highland, Björn, feel free to turn on your cameras again so we can see you, and then we'll take a couple of questions. So there was actually one here from in the Q&A, which I think is pretty interesting. So how do you see the investor adoption in this field? So what is the uptake from investors on tokenized securities or tokenized real estate? How do you view that, and what is your strategy sort of to tackle it? So I don't know, maybe so Haile, you can start.
Sure, absolutely. Thank you for the question. So I think we have outlined a communication strategy that we have are going to implement. First and foremost, letting our investors know that we gave them information on DigiShares and T0. We also are hosting a webinar specifically for the investor database here. But we have found that most people have no idea what we're talking about. There's a lot of education that needs to be implemented, and through that, once they understand the implications, they are on board. We haven't had a single investor that's objected to this, but nevertheless, there is a learning curve that has to be implemented there in order to educate them on the benefits of this. But from an investor standpoint, I mean, nothing really changes, right? Their units, their shares, they just become tokens. They're still interacting through the same investor portal. I mean, to them, most of our investors are passive investors. So to them, they understand the implications, but they don't necessarily care. So that's kind of what we've seen from our end.
Kopano, you have any insight on that? If you heard the question. You're muted. You're muted, Kopano. We can't hear you.
Oh, sorry. No, I was just asking to you, please rephrase the question. Yeah, you busted me for a second.
The question is, how are you concerned with the investor uptake on this, and sort of what is your strategy for reaching investors? Do you think you can convince your investors to invest into tokenized securities, or you will have a challenge there, and how will you tackle it?
Yeah, no, definitely we are confident, because you see, our focus is very much on the value proposition. We're not really interested in the nuances of tokenization sounding nice, or it being in fashion. We're interested in the efficiencies it affords the people we'd like to service. And as a result of that, everything we do and configure, every demand we've had of DigiShares has always been speaking to that particular objective. So we are confident of servicing that market. Some of the initiatives I did mention in the presentation speaks to our dedication to achieving that. So it's not really about, is it cool to buy the token? Is the investment proposition here that that is making sense, that you could not get from the listed market, that you could not get from the REITs, which only, if I'm not mistaken, institutional investors only have about a 10% exposure of real estate globally. So it's not the main thing. The rest of the world is not on the public market. So that is the space we want to tap into. And some of the things that we do, for an example, is that we have open dialogues. We organize monthly sessions with key individuals from the various spaces where we believe. For example, I spoke about the cash economy. I spoke about there is a middle class that is also interested in this. There are other fractional shares that people buy on other companies. So there's already an interest in taking a bit of control in investments in this country and on the continent as well. As I mentioned, other examples of innovations that have excelled. So we're not worried about whether there's a demand or not. Our focus is on how we are able to service the demand through the value proposition. I don't know if that covers it, but it's very important that we focus on the vendors in the market and not the noise.
It's a pragmatic approach. We very much agree with that. We have the same take on it. so maybe Cobano, we can just take the next question also with you. So do you see institutional interest in this? Is that also a direction you're going in, pursuing?
Funny enough, yes, we did. I think I remember speaking to you about it, because that was one of the things that, led to us needing to do things like the quarterly results that we spoke to asset owners about. We're not trying to increase the cost of doing business, but I mean, honestly speaking, you can't, do cost cuttings to avoid fraud.
It's 17 hours.
You kind of have to. You have to always. It doesn't matter what it costs. That has to be in place. And I see my colleagues smiling there because they know it's a very demanded aspect of the space. So yeah, with the institutional investors, the only thing they ever ask is that, well, we know what's going on. We hear that it's tokenization and all that, but will we be able to go on the desktop and see what's going on with these investment opportunities? Because as institutional investors, our buy-in is very high because of the cost associated with it. So if you're able to reduce the cost and bring us opportunities that allow us to play a role, we're more than happy to, but we need to understand the corporate governance and, because obviously that institutionals are a very formal space. They want, if the asset investment is big enough, they want to have board members in the vehicle and things like that. So if you're accommodating those aspects, then they're very much open to interacting with you. So we've had a private equity firm interested. One pension fund actually asked us about it because, some of their money allocations really at this point, it's just circulating amongst the same space. There's only so much of the same thing you can buy, Yeah.
Great. Thank you. So Hal, can we get your take on that? Do you see institutional interest?
We have not so far. Most of the institutional investors that we have talked to here in the United States, some of them didn't even really know the space yet. Those that are, they have not invested funds from our end. Like, we're not seeing capital go into it. I mean, I think in the rest of the world, it's taken, off more than it has in the United States, as it's been slow here. But nevertheless, interest is gaining. And like I said, in the next 5 to 10 years, I do believe that there's going to be all sorts of institutional investors flocking to this space.
Great. So Björn, do you see any institutional interest in your job?
Yeah, based on our conversations that are coming in, we're definitely seeing a lot of institutional interest. The only issue they have is that they have longer lead times. So from discussions to investing, it's going to at least probably take 6 to 12 months. And just through seminars like this, I've actually had some of the largest real estate funds in the world reach out to us, and I'm not exaggerating, but it's preliminary discussions. So they're all trying to figure out how to do their pilot project and kind of save face and avoid embarrassment. I would say it's probably what they're more concerned about with. But actually, I do think that just using some logic here, like, if you look at a lot of these liquidity venues, like digital exchanges like T0, INX, or ADDX or SDX, they're throwing so much money at this in terms of the infrastructure that it's almost like building a coliseum, and you actually need gladiators, right? And it's kind of this chicken and egg thing where as long as there's product, people will show up to buy it, and those venues will probably do their best to make sure they're not embarrassed. So I think there is kind of an advantage in terms of spearing ahead, because they want to promote you, and the more eggs that are in the basket that are being promoted at these exchanges, the less incentive they will have to help you on a marginal basis. And right now we're on the stage where they are desperate for product. So I think that is one thing to keep in mind. I really notice that with the discussions that we're having with these exchange venues. They really need product. So I think it, from that point of view, it is worth that while. Yeah.
Great, thanks. So Hal, there's a direct question for you. Would you consider tokenizing non-US properties and I guess generally third-party projects, right? How would that work?
If you can kind of elaborate more on that question. Non-US properties?
Yeah, non-US properties generally, is that something you are looking at longer term maybe?
No, I mean, again, there's so much development and action that's happening here in the States, particularly in the Texas market. I mean, you're seeing the people who are flocking from, you know, California, Chicago, New York, and they're, you know, Texas has been the greatest beneficiary for that. So, you know, there's so many investments here locally that we're focused primarily on that.
Great. Then there's there's a follow-up question. Do you consider Central America, Caribbean like domestic? Or
No,
Puerto Rico,
we
for
would focus, yeah. We primarily focus in the southern United States. We have investments all of our investments primarily in Texas. We do have one in Las Vegas and one in Kansas City as well. But aside from that, all of our investments, we really focus on the southern United States, or kind of what is known as a Sun Belt region, which takes you through, you know, Georgia, and obviously Texas is where all majority of our projects are.
Great, thanks.
Thank you.
There's a question also for you, Capano. Maybe you can see it in the Q&A. So can you sort of describe a typical investor? I guess it's called an avatar investor. So I guess a typical investor for you, and how would you reach them? Your ideal investor, maybe. You're muted again. Yeah.
Yeah, no, sorry. Yeah. Okay, well, the ideal investor that I will mention is specifically to the market we are targeting, this side, you know, and on the continent. And that would be the cash-rich working class of this country, to be quite frank with you, because, you know, as soon as you go up the classes, I mean, you drive the nice cars and stuff, but you're debt trapped. So, you know, there's not much disposable investment to cash on there, because most of their monies are stuck with the institutional investors anyway, you know. So for us, that is our core market. And, you know, so that would be someone who has, you know, a job, has money saved away, but does not really know their options, you know, in terms of what to do. And you already find informal structures like that existing in South Africa. And so it's not like a concept that we need to test. It exists, you know, it just does not, it's just not serviced in this fashion at the moment. So for us, that is a very much a go-to point, you know, because institutional investors are, you know, like Bjorn said, it's, their timeframes are slightly different, you know, so we're not trying to take 3 years to do something. So for us, it's a normal working person who saves money, doesn't know their options, but makes enough such that, because in South Africa, for an example, you know, pension benefits it's still laws that need fine tuning, if you will, you know, whether it's the protection side of it or you know, otherwise, because that's the part of the population that is not engulfed in debt, funny enough, you know, so they're actually the spenders of the economy. In other words, spending surplus money, because that's what you need for investments, you know, as a starting point. A person cannot invest if they don't cover their basic needs. So, you know, that is the ideal people we've been interacting with. We have had some high net worth individuals who are interested, provided we have privacy provisions in place, which I don't know why, but you know, it kind of makes sense. But that's not the major market. That's just a bespoke offering that they've asked us for. Yeah.
Great, thanks. I think we'll round it off with the final question for the three panelists, which would be, of course, how do you see the space developing over the next 2, 3, 4, 5 years? I don't know how far you can see into the future. So Hal, you want to start?
Absolutely. And thank you again, DigiShares, for inviting me to speak on this panel. It was a pleasure to share our experience with you all, and we look forward to continuing that. To answer that question, you know, I mentioned it earlier, like in the next decade, I believe that this is going to be the status quo, and this is going to be the standard of way of operating business all around the world, right? Because now we're talking about linking a global community here. You know, it could take longer than that, I think it's oftentimes compared to the advent of the internet itself, which back in the early 90s, if you recall, it took a decade for mass adoption, and then it took even longer for us to build on that. And here, we can say that blockchain in its technology kind of really became apparent right around that 2012 timeframe. You're looking from that standpoint of where we are today. I mean, we are leaps and bounds ahead of even the initial timeline of mass adoption. So certainly this could be much faster than we anticipated. And as I mentioned, we're really taking the effort of trying to be a leader in this space as we go through this process. So that's the answer to that is I would say 10 years on the long side, and on the short side, I would say 5 years less.
Thank you. Kobana?
Oh, sorry. Thank you. Thank you once again for everybody making time, all my colleagues on the panels. Really, really appreciate it from different time zones. I think that's a very good achievement by DigiShares. You guys should be very pleased with being able to, bring together literally different quadrants of the world, offering what is quite frankly very different outcomes, from the same basis point, if you really think about it. And it's been a learning experience for myself as well. And going forward, I think the future of tokenization, given what I've just said, you can't generalize it really. I really, really think it's market specific on what's going to happen. So one thing that I do know is that it's going to play a major role in the way in which the financial sector conducts its business. I think as you can see with the major banks in the US, all of a sudden, Uncle Morgan and them are starting to acknowledge cryptocurrencies here to stay, whereas before they were banning their own employees from using it. So it's a train that you cannot stop. And therefore, because it's here to stay, what you're going to have is a lot of what we believe and what we anticipate is streamlining of the standards of the sort of institutional space, but because the cost of business is so low, it will be accessible to everybody. So that means retail investors and institutional investors are going to actually overlap spaces. And I think they'll be wise to do so because, the way they hit the private equity firms with the GameStop thing tells you that, you cannot ignore these guys forever anymore. They're scaling enough to make an impact, they literally squeezed those private equity firms. I think that was earlier this year or late last year. So we really think that it's going to become a normal part of the way in which the financial sector is orientated, simply because it allows you access to more people and more opportunities, and that is the key component, I think, of it. I don't think it's because, oh, great, we want to be able to say it's cryptocurrency and it's fashionable. No, it's actually, there are real efficiencies in blockchain and this particular business model, and that is what yourself and all my colleagues, all of us need to be focused on, because if you lose sight of that, the big boys, once they realize it, they'll overtake you very quickly, so it's very key that we continue to support each other in that fashion and openly interact with everybody that's interested. I do see Ashley has tried to confirm my email address. It's the one that I typed out, and thank you for everybody's time.
Thank you very much. Björn, last words?
Yeah, just very quickly. I guess it's probably hard to generalize, as was just mentioned, but for example, if we look at financial markets with ETF adoption, it took a good 10-15 years before they were actually adopted, and so the point being is, the whole idea of crypto investors or digital asset investors, it's going to converge with the security token world, and it's quite as long as there's a KYC AML accreditation process. These crypto investors at these custodians like Coinbase or Fidelity Digital Asset Custody, they're all asset managers, all established asset managers, and they all come from the securities world. So it's actually quite logical that they will migrate or diversify into the security token universe, just like they did with ETFs 10-15 years ago. It's just I would say it's just very logical to extrapolate, but it's just extrapolation. Yeah, that's it for me.
Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for attending here today, and thank you to the panelists and speakers. We have the next webinar in September. Hope that some of you will also join there. It's focused on stablecoins, which are extremely important for this industry here to become successful. So maybe a little bit more technical, but also I think we have some good speakers lined up that will make it intuitive and easy to understand and relevant for everyone. So thank you everyone for attending today, and yeah, see you next time, hopefully. Bye bye.